Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it around me and in front of me. I talk about tropical houseplants. So today I'm going to continue on with the plant review series. It seems that most people are enjoying that, so as promised when I first started this, I'll try to get one of these review videos out each week. And today, you might be able to tell what plant I'm going to be reviewing. We're going to be talking about the Monstera Thai Constellation. And I thought it's a good time to talk about this because of everything that is happening with the Thai constellations and the Costa Farms issue, I would say, in the States. Obviously, this isn't really affecting anybody in Europe or the UK, but if you're into tropical houseplants, you've probably seen all the talk that's been happening online about this specific plant. I'm not going to go into any of the details about that issue, so to speak. I am literally just going to talk about my experiences. And again, for the new people here, there is no way of making this review unbiased. It's going to be biased to my experience with my specific plant in my growing conditions and how I care for the plant. It might be different to how you care for the plant. It might be different from your experiences, but that is part of the fun of doing this review series, is that hopefully all of you, if you've got this plant, you've had it for a while and you want to write your own review, please, I do encourage you, put that down in the comments below. Eventually what I would like is for this review series, for these videos, the standalone videos, to be somewhere that people can go and check and see what other people's experiences has been with plants. As I've mentioned on previous videos, you will get reviews about plant stores, but you will very rarely get reviews about plants. And it's usually because it's very biased. But at least if it's all together in one place, you can make up your own mind before investing what could be an awful lot of money. And I'm looking at you, the lovely people in the US at the moment with everything going on with the Costa Farms, an awful lot of money to get a specific plant, like this one, for instance. But yeah, just to give you a bit of a background on kind of how these reviews are structured, if you're new here, welcome, by the way. We will go through and I'll kind of talk a bit more about the background, maybe how this plant came into my care, and then I'll talk about speed of growth, how quickly a plant might be growing, ease of propagation, how easy it is to propagate, and then I'll talk about availability. And availability is going to be the one thing that's probably going to get caught up in the history with this video. And by that, I mean, if you're looking at certain things that I'm talking about in this video, and you're just like, this really doesn't apply to me or my environment, there's two things I needed to consider. One, I'm talking about the experience that I've had in the UK, probably relatively similar to the EU as well. It might be different even at this time of posting this video in your location. And the other thing is, check the date of this video, because if it's in the future, if it's a couple of years in the future, things have potentially changed when it comes to availability and pricing for this plant. And then I'll go on and usually start to wrap up with pests. And at the very end, I'll do final thoughts. And final thoughts, usually I'll give a score from 1 to 10 in terms of what I think of the plant. And also, if knowing what I know now and I didn't have this plant, would I purchase this plant? But yeah, I think that's enough of the kind of groundwork on this one. Let's dive into the first topic. Okay, going into background for this plant, and let me bring it up and you can have a look. And it's a very awkward plant to get in a video, but I will try to move it around and you might be able to see, if I bring it in a bit closer, you can then see what the plant looks like. And sorry, just to kind of, for the people who've been here for the conservatory tour, they know why I'm looking up. I'm growing this currently in pond, yeah. I always get confused, and for some reason I mention leca, even though I've only ever grown 3 things in leca and gave up really quickly. I don't know why that happens. But yeah, so in pond at the moment. I did have it in soil, in an aroid soil mix to begin with. It's not in a self-watering container. It is being watered as if it was in soil, basically. So I'm letting the water drain through. Aerial roots for days. But yeah, let me put this back down because it is getting a bit heavy. There we go. The plant is still in frame as well. Now, for the eagle-eyed amongst you and who've been around for the last couple of videos, I am trying to do B-roll at the very end of the video usually, where I'll do some close-up video shots of the plant. It might happen, it might not happen. It's a bit of a pain to do, but I will try it. So always, if you want to see a bit more of a close-up of the plant, check the end of the video as well. That should have the B-roll on it. But back to this, and in terms of background. How did this plant come into my care? Now, I was fortunate enough, and what generally happens with Thai constellations, at least in Europe for a while, because they were being grown, I'm pretty sure in the Netherlands at some point, there would always be a bit of an influx that would happen suddenly, and then they would be off the market for a very long period of time unless you're getting propagates from individual sellers. The shops would get them, they would sell out quite quickly, very similar to what happens, I think, in most places around the world. And I was fortunate enough to grab this, and hopefully it'll be on the title of the video, I think coming up to 2.5 years ago now. So the prices were a bit steep, but not as steep as they are now. But we'll touch a bit more on that in terms of availability. I got it in a good condition. And what I will usually do with this, and hopefully I'll put it here, is I've got a plant care app, and the pictures are not Instagram worthy by any stretch of the imagination. It's just something to remind me what the plant looks like, although I know what a Thai constellation looks like. But I will put it on here so you can see what the plant looked like when I first got it. Now, it did still have some fenestration. Some of the older leaves are still on here, actually. Let me turn it around and you can have a look. I think this probably would have been one of the original kind of mature leaves that were on there. There was maybe 1 or 2 immature leaves, so maybe they only had 1 fenestration and no fenestrations. But as you can see, for instance, with this leaf here, I am getting, hopefully that's coming up on camera, I'll have a look. You might be able to see, yeah, there you go. You can see my hands through the secondary fenestrations. And the secondary fenestrations, for those that don't know, are the holes in the middle of the leaf rather than just the splits. The splits are the main fenestrations, the secondary fenestrations are the holes. But the one thing I will say, and hopefully, let me bring it up again. I'm doing this all the time now. Let me grab this so you might be able to see. If I bring that there, you can see the browning on the kind of variegated sections, the whole sectoral section there. And that's the one thing I will say that I've noticed with the Thai constellation versus the Albo Borsigiana Monstera, basically, is yes, you do get slightly larger leaves with this. It tends to be more like a traditional size Monstera. It's not a large form. I don't know if there's a middle form. This might be a middle form, although I haven't had it for long enough to know if it's not the large form, but it's definitely not like the Borsigiana where the leaves are a lot smaller. This can get quite large, and they have sized up considerably since I first got this plant. But it's an interesting one because it grows a bit janky. You might have been able to see the janky support stick and all the wires that I had attached to it. But the interesting thing with the crisping is in relation to the Albo in my condition, and granted I've got relatively high humidity in here in the conservatory. In the wintertime, it might be 70 to 80% humidity. In the summer, because I open up windows because it gets way too hot in here, it might drop down. I'm looking at it now and I've got the window open. It's down to 60% humidity. But the fully white sections on a Thai constellation, for me, I have always found them to crisp up quite easily. The one thing I will say is it doesn't progress as quickly as it does on an Albo. An Albo, if you start getting crisping quite quickly, you might lose that entire white section because it's going to entirely crispy. This one hasn't done that for me. But I think that's a bit more of the background that I wanted to say. Is there anything else? Yeah, I mean, the cute story behind this is I was kind of on my computer waiting for it to come online. I purchased it quite quickly. It was at the local... Actually, no, I didn't purchase it. That was the stress of this plant. It was at the local plant shop and I wanted to go and pick one out. So I knew by going to the plant store and buying it there and there, as soon as they announced that they had them in, I would at least have that opportunity. And I did that, and that drive to the shop was stressful to say the least, because there was a high risk that they would all be gone within the like 20 minutes that it would take me to drive to the store. And the reality was, I think they had bought in 15 or 20 at that particular moment in time. Most of them had sold online, and there was only 3 or 4 that I could personally choose from, because they were from other people as well that had already purchased and were coming in because they wanted to choose as well, but they'd done the collect in store situation. So I didn't manage to get a bit of a choice. It wouldn't have been the one that I would have chosen. There was another one that was stunning, but it sold online, and I think it probably sold for a bit more because of the level of variegation. But enough about the background. Let's dive into the next topic. Now, speed of growth with this one. And this is a key one, and I think based on what I'm hearing from other people, this is true for a lot of people. The reality is it's a relatively slow grower. And I think, as I said, this is what other people have at least told me. It's not going to be a super fast Monstera. And if I benchmark it, because I know people like to benchmark things in these videos, this grows considerably slower than the standard Monstera deliciosa. It grows slower still, for me at least, in my experience, to the Monstera albo. Out of all of them, this is the slowest growing one. Now, for those that might not know, the Monstera Thai Constellation, if I'm not mistaken, was created via tissue culture. It's being created or multiplied by tissue culture. That's the whole issue with the Costa Farm situation there as well. But it's a beautiful plant. The white variegation is stable, but it's less, you can't control it as easily as you might do with an albo, with cuttings and trying to kind of make sure that the stem has got enough variegation in it. So you've got less control over it, but it won't revert on you, basically. So you might still get sectoral bits. You can see this is one of the newest leaves. It does have some slightly white sections there. I've done another video on variegation and talk about layers within the leaf, and I'll link it up at the top there. And you can understand why it's not quite as crisp and white as you might be able if I bring that into the screen as this, or it's cream, it's not white. That's the other difference. But this is a relatively slow growing plant. And to give you an idea, and I'll use the pothos that I always go on about, the golden pothos, as a benchmark. In here, I might get 2-3 leaves in a month. This plant might give me a new leaf once every 3 months in the winter, maybe. It's more actively growing in the summer, but even then it might only be a new leaf every month and a half to 2 months. So that gives you an indication. Which also makes it slightly more stressful when you get tears on the leaves with these plants, because a lot of the times cosmetic damage doesn't bother me too much. The plant can still photosynthesize. But because it takes so long to get a new leaf on this plant, and you're going to be looking at those leaves for a while, the cosmetic damage can be a bit annoying at times. But yeah, that was what I wanted to say about speed of growth. This is definitely a slow one. Now, ease of propagation, and this is an interesting one because I can't personally talk from experience. I know this is a relatively straightforward plant from what I've understood to do tissue culture on. I know a couple of people online that do tissue culture, and they're always tissue culturing this plant, mainly because there's a lot of people that want this plant as well. But that's not the only way. You can technically take a cutting and propagate it as you would a normal Monstera. I have not done that because I'm not comfortable cutting up this plant just yet. I don't have enough leaves, and as I said, it's a very slow grower. So, and I didn't get it particularly big. I think, maybe I've mentioned, I only had about 3 leaves, 1 more mature leaf, and the other ones that were slightly more immature. And I'll show you why this plant can be a bit challenging to propagate. Now, hopefully, this might come up on the video, but the internodal spacing for this plant is very, very, very short. So you'd really be needing something very, very thin, like a pair of scissors or a secateurs is probably not going to be particularly safe with this plant. You're going to need a very thin, very sharp knife to be able to take the cutting for that. It is possible, but as I said, that internodal space can be a bit challenging. I don't think, based on what I've heard from other people, after you've taken the cutting, that it's any different than it would be to maybe propagate an albo monstera or a standard monstera as well. But just bear that in mind, that it's not the easiest thing to propagate. I think the only other plant that I have that again has very, very, very short internodal space, so you can't make a cut very easily. Granted, that one is worse than this one, is my Philodendron bilietiae, basically. And I do have another review video on that plant as well, and I'll link it up at the top there as well. But yeah, not the easiest plant to propagate. Now, coming into availability, which this is going to be the contentious subject, basically. Now, when I got it, and as I said, it was a good few years ago now, the price for this plant, at least here, and I got it from a shop, and they would get it from the Netherlands, as far as I'm aware, was very, very low triple digits. Ironically enough, I missed it at some point. The drop that they did of the same Thai constellation, even the previous exact drop, which might have been 3 or 4 months prior, this was on very high double digits with 3 or 4 leaves and at least 1 mature leaf. And I know, based on the scenario now, those are prices that you're sitting there going, oh my God, I can't believe it was ever that cheap. That should give you an idea, basically. But I did get it for a good price. I know the same store, just purely because of the supply and demand, because they weren't coming into the market that often. And I had become good friends with some of the store owners that were selling these plants. It wasn't just that they were trying to be grabby with the money and charging more for it because there was more people demanding it. The nurseries themselves are selling these plants for a lot more as they saw that the demand was going up. Now, to a certain point, whether or not nurseries are basically not flooding the market with these plants, they might have loads of them, but might be because they want to kind of artificially boost up those prices. The more people that have been waiting for longer, the more desperate people might be and the more money they might pay. So I can't talk to that. I'm assuming that's at least a theory on this. I will touch briefly on the Costa Farms issue, is that they were saying that they were going to bring out a whole bunch of tissue cultures of this plant and they were going to provide them for quite cheaply in the States. Again, for the people in the States, I'm sorry, that I would assume there's a lot of people that feel a bit raw about this because you've been waiting for a while for those plants. And yes, some of them are being released, but the prices are mid to slightly higher triple digits from what I'm seeing, which is a lot of money, basically. But I don't know. I mean, I can only guesstimate, even with a tissue culture. I don't know. I have never done tissue culture. I would like to try tissue culture at some point, just because I'm a bit of a science nerd. So the concept of me dealing with like a mini lab situation just brings me so much joy. So if anybody's done tissue culture, I really don't even know where to start looking. If you've got any good videos that you've seen on YouTube and stuff that you've tried out yourself, please do comment down below. I'd love to hear some of your kind of experiences if you've ever done that, basically. But yeah, it's a slow growing plant. I would assume it's relatively slow growing in the tissue culture form as well. So I would maybe hazard a guess that that is also the reason why they don't come onto the market as often, because it takes a while for them to get them market ready to a decent size that people will pay a good amount of money basically for. And again, the one thing that I will say with this plant, because it's so slow growing, if you can, and I fully understand that this might not always be an option, see if you can get one that's already got at least 1 mature leaf on it. Because again, I have heard stories from people that have got very, very juvenile forms of these plants, and 2 or 3 years later, they're only just starting to maybe see the first few fenestrations. Just bear that in mind, basically. As I mentioned already, the prices for this now are higher than what it would have been 2.5 years ago. And already back then, it was a relatively expensive plant back then. So, and in terms of availability and how often it comes on the market, as I said, it generally tends to be in waves. So a few months So if basically it's a situation, if you see one and you really want one and you can afford one, that's the important thing here, grab one right then and there. Hesitation in any way or form, at least at this time, and it will probably mean you'll lose a plant, basically. So yeah, this is one of those interesting and slightly stressful to buy plants. But yeah, that's what I would say for right now. Obviously, this might change, and I really truly do hope it does change. Because of the stable variegation, I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon. I would almost love for this to become a plant that you could easily buy in most plant stores for not an awful lot of money, almost to the same level of quintessential Monstera and as the Monstera deliciosa. Whether or not that's going to happen, I don't know. And when that might happen, if it does, again, I don't know. There's a lot of people that are willing to pay a lot of money for this plant, so it might be a while. But yeah, let's move on to the next subject. So let's talk about pests. Everybody kind of cringes. This plant is no different in terms of its pest pressures as in relation to the deliciosa or the albo. They all have the same kind of pest pressures that I found. So if I've got thrips tend to like all my Monstera plants, this will have thrips. Sometimes it might get spider mites, depending if there's spider mites around. They don't go that quickly on this one. Thrips will go quickly on most Monsteras, deliciosa, albos, and this as well, so just keep an eye out for those. Interestingly, and I will touch wood, with this plant, in my conservatory, and the people that have been here for a while know that I've been dealing with a lot of mealybugs for a while now, this has not had any mealybugs yet. So that's one thing. I've never really struggled from scale, so I never talk about scale. This one, when it was in soil, never suffered from fungus gnats, but that's another thing that I will always say, and this is how I've always treated my Monsteras, the albo, the deliciosa, this one as well, even when it's in my aroid soil mix, with all of these Monsteras, I will let them go fully dry before I water them. Same with this as well, even in pond now, I will let it go fully dry and then water it. Because they do have a propensity, especially the more variegated ones, to go towards rot. So, and that might also mean that my growth rate is a bit slower because it's kind of getting shocked in and out of like dryness to wetness. So fair, I'll take that as a comment. But yeah, with this, it can have a plethora of pests. Nothing that I've found will grow or kind of multiply exponentially. The one thing I will always say, watch out for thrips with this one. But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say about pests. Now moving on to final thoughts for this plant. And I think my final thoughts might surprise some of you. And let's start with the first question that I usually will ask myself is, knowing what I know now, would I still purchase this plant if I didn't have it? Yes, I still would purchase this plant, even knowing all that I know now about the slowness of growth and that it's a bit more challenging to maybe propagate. Not impossible, as I said, but challenging to propagate because of the internodal spaces. And in terms of a score for this plant, from 0 being the worst, 10 being the best, I would say a strong 6 or a 7. The reason why I'm taking points off there, and you can see obviously I'd buy it again even if I knew what I knew now. Yes, I don't have the biggest patience. I don't have the best patience generally. People that have been around know this. And yes, I would like this plant to grow a bit faster, but I still think it's a beautiful plant. I still think it's a very, very attractive looking Monstera. The fact that the variegation is stable is also a big plus for me. Obviously, I'm taking some of the points off because it's a slightly slower grower, and the fact that the propagation can be a bit challenging, the internodal spaces, and also that the creamy coloration on the variegation can go crispy faster than it would do maybe with the alba. Again, this is in my experience. But yeah, but overall, a really cool plant. The question that probably most people would want me to answer at the moment, and again, this is to the current situation, I think the Thai constellations are selling, when they are coming out at the moment, through Costa Farms for about $600, if I'm not mistaken. It might be wrong. Is it worth that for me? I don't honestly know. I'm a bit hesitant to pay large sums of money for certain plants. If it was a bit less, I would say it's worth it. The $600 is quite a bit of money. So probably not at that price for me, unless you're getting a very mature specimen and quite a bit larger than this. Probably not. But again, that is just my opinion on this. It's not to shame anybody who thinks that that is a good price for that and they want to pay for that. Good, go for it, basically. It's whatever you're comfortable and whatever you would want to spend for that plant and whatever your financial situation makes you comfortable paying. But yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say. Hopefully this isn't too much of a controversial topic. But I thought it'd be a good time to talk about the Thai constellation with everything else that's going on at the moment. But yeah, hopefully you've enjoyed. If you've got your own review, as I said at the beginning of this video, do drop it down below as well. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed. Hopefully I shall see you here soon. And I truly, truly hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks. Bye.